I'm just really quickly going to straighten my hat up, but you can cut around this, right? There we go. I'm Bentley. I'm an editorial and commercial photographer based in the UK. I don't think I've ever been starstruck as such, because to be fair, I don't think I could probably do this job if I did sort of fall into that category. But there has definitely been moments after a shoot has wrapped where perhaps you're waiting for the images to copy across or whatever, and the gravity of what's just happened kind of settles in. The time that always sort of springs to mind on that front was probably the first job that the NME ever sent me to shoot abroad. It was a festival in Holland. And they'd got me sort of stage access for Noel Gallagher, and sort of all of a sudden afterwards, 15-year-old me was like, hang on a minute, I've just been like on stage with like somebody who meant a lot to me growing up and whatever. But that all kind of happened afterwards. In the moment you do it and you're so focused on trying to capture what you're there to do. Yeah, thankfully it was after the whole thing was over that I was like, wow, that's kind of nuts that actually just happened in real life. A little bit of an out-of-body kind of experience, I think. That's a tough one. I'm not sure about strange, because I've never been sent to the middle of a rainforest or whatever. But in terms of sort of trickier and definitely more interesting places, I absolutely adore when I get to shoot in the middle of the desert. Back in October, we were out in the Mojave on a historic section of Route 66, and we were shooting in these abandoned houses and whatnot, and shooting portrait setups. And you honestly, yeah, you don't know what's there wildlife-wise, and you are literally hundreds of miles from civilization. And moments like that are kind of surreal when you feel like you're the only people left on Earth. I'm not sure about embarrassing per se, but from the point of view of me being mortified, I had my laptop just before Christmas die in the middle of my first shoot for a magazine that I'd wanted to work with forever. And I was there shooting two pretty sort of, yeah, famous actors. And literally the art director was watching my monitor as I was shooting into capture, and she was like, oh, the screen's gone black. And I was like, oh, okay, I wonder if it's the battery, it was fully charged or whatever. And I kid you not, my laptop never turned back on from that moment. It literally died in the middle of that job. So thank God for shooting to memory cards as well. But no, yeah, so that was embarrassing from the point of view of like all the times this could happen. Why was it why was it now, like when we're in a high pressure situation? But no, thankfully I've never fallen over or fallen off stage or anything like that. But yeah, just I find it embarrassing whenever kit doesn't work, basically, because at the end of the day, like, you're there to do a job, and it's not your fault, but I don't know, I somehow feel it's my fault if a flash isn't syncing or if something's run out of batteries or whatever. There's something in it that's so beautiful. So I never formally trained as a photographer. Taking pictures is something that I'd done from a very early age, and before I even really knew how a camera worked per se, like I was always fascinated with my family's just little Minolta rangefinder camera. So I learnt, as it were, with film and sort of messing up 23 out of 24 exposures or whatever. But yeah, so realistically, movies probably had more of an impact on me growing up, I think, in terms of developing a visual style and a visual language. And even to this day, a lot of my portraiture, when it comes to environmental portraits, there's something kind of cinematic about it in terms of the framing and the way in which I try and present people in an environment that they're in. So yeah, so it wasn't until I sort of got probably into my later teens that I really sort of started paying attention to photography per se, like as an art form. Up until that point, it had predominantly been, yeah, like I said, movies that had really sort of influenced the look and feel of what I was trying to do. Hard to see the light when everything inside and waiting for. The music industry in general has changed an unfathomable amount in the last sort of 10 or 15 years, and subsequently, obviously, that has had sort of a drip down effect to the very small part that I play in that. So obviously print magazines have sort of gone away quite a lot in that sort of time frame, and sort of in a wider sense, people don't buy music. So subsequently the way that entire business model works has changed. But what is quite exciting is in that same amount of time you've had sort of all of these burgeoning platforms that simply didn't exist 20 years ago. So as much as there are pessimists who will say, oh, hang on a minute, there isn't as many clients potentially out there or whatever, in theory there is more and more purposes and need for that kind of imagery, whether it's press shots, live imagery or whatever, than ever before, because you've got more places to share that work and to sort of, yeah, and to need to publish content. As much as I hate the word content, there is a daily need for a lot of, yeah, bands, record labels, management companies to be sort of, yeah, engaging with their audience and whatnot. So some doors have closed, some print magazines have gone away, but the online side of things has presented like an entire new world of opportunities for people like myself who are producing that kind of imagery. So aside from whichever camera body I'm using at that point, for me, being able to light my subjects on location is a really, really big deal. So for me, my general travel kit at the moment consists of two S1 Interfit S1 heads and a Badger Unleashed. I love the fact that those two heads all work together as part of one big system. I can sync them all using the same trigger, and they all use the same modifiers and whatnot. So in terms of modifiers, because again, I'm often carrying this stuff with me from location to location, I personally am a really big fan of the larger parabolic umbrellas. I use a combination of both silver and white, and I often double diffuse them, so it's bounced and then it's diffused through a white diffusion sock. So yeah, I'd say the umbrellas, the Unleashed heads, and then the S1s are my must-haves when I'm traveling, especially for editorial work. So yeah, no, so I came from a music background, so I was in bands and things when I was younger, and I discovered quite early on that I was actually more interested in being in that world rather than necessarily having to be in a band. As much fun as that was, and as much as I still very much do play music, I quite quickly discovered that I was serving more of a function in that environment by capturing and telling those stories. And once that light bulb moment kind of happened and I realized that that was something people could do for a living, it kind of exploded from there. So a lot of the early work that I was shooting was live music. And I think, to be honest, that was the environment in which I learned how to properly manually expose a photograph. And the cool thing about that was, once you've learned how to do that in the most, I don't know, dodgy lighting circumstances known to man, as soon as I can then control the light, absolutely anything was possible. So yeah, so music is still really, really important to me, and it's definitely sort of, yeah, it's definitely steered me to where I'm at this point, I think, in my career.